Good morning and welcome to the joint meeting of the Assembly Committee on Ways and Means and Senate Committee on Finance. Madam Secretary, would you please call the roll?
Senator Cannizzaro. Senator Dondero Loop. Senator Goicoechea. Senator Harris. Senator Neal. Senator Severs-Gansert. Senator Wynn. Senator Titus. Assemblywoman Anderson. Assemblywoman Backus. Assemblywoman Brown-May. Assemblywoman Dickman. Assemblywoman Gorlow. Assemblyman Hafen. Assemblywoman Howdigi. Assemblywoman Kasama. Assemblyman Miller. Assemblyman O'Neill. Assemblywoman Peters. Assemblyman Watts. Assemblyman Yeager. Chair Monroe Moreno.
And I am here. Would you please mark Senator Cannizzaro, Senator Harris, Senator Neal, Assemblyman O'Neill, Assemblyman Peters, and Assemblyman Yeager present as they arrive.
I'm here, Madam Chair.
Senator Neal is present. Welcome to everyone here in the audience in Carson City and those joining us by video in Las Vegas and those that are joining us on the internet. Just a few housekeeping things. If you have any electronic devices, I ask that you silence them now. If you wish to testify, please sign it at the table in the back of the room, and please provide your business card to our committee secretary before you leave the room. Those who will be joining us online, please be sure to mute your mic so that there's no interference. And when you do come to the table to speak, make sure you press the mic button, state your name clearly, and spell it for the record. So we will go to the first item on today's agenda, and that will be a presentation from the governor's office. And I believe we have Ms. Stevenson with us. Oh, nope. I'm sorry, my mistake. Yeah, the first item is, there's one before you. It's a review of the legislative audit summaries. Sorry about that. I was looking at you, and he's looking at me like, wait a second, I think I'm first. Good morning.
Good morning. We're happy to go second if you'd prefer that. Thank you, Chair Monroe Moreno, Chair Dondero Loop, and members of Assembly Ways and Means and Senate Finance. We appreciate the opportunity to be here today. For the record, Dan Crossman, Legislative Auditor. The Audit Division, for those that may not be as familiar, is composed of 32 professionals from diverse backgrounds that allow us to do the difficult and unique work that we do. I have with me today Shannon Rydell, my Chief Deputy Legislative Auditor, and Todd Peterson, Audit Supervisor, both who are the most senior members of the Audit Division team. Both have been with LCB for 23 years, almost pretty close to the day. And I just wanted to introduce them and express my appreciation to them for all the work they do and helping us do the work that we are asked to complete. So I'd like to take the opportunity today and to thank you for allowing us to be here to jump in front of some budgets and today to talk about our audit report summaries document. A copy of that should be hopefully in front of you there. It's also available on our website, and we'll get it uploaded as an exhibit shortly here. The publication includes information on the audit reports that we've issued since January of 2021 through the most recent Legislative Commission Audit Subcommittee meeting, which we held in last month in January. The report here includes a table of contents, so each audit that was released can be easily located, as well as references to the applicable pages in the governor's recommended budget. The purpose of presenting this document to you today is to make sure that you're aware that it is a resource for you, where you can identify recent audits as well as our recommendations. Today we'll not go into any specific detail on any of those the audits, but rather give you an overview of our process and explain a little bit about what we do. I also would like to mention that on our website, if there's a specific audit or an area of interest, all of our audits are searchable. The last 20 years of audits are all on our website. As indicated on the bottom of the cover letter on the first page of the Audit Report Summaries publication, this document, we identify significant monetary benefits through our audits, including potential cost savings, revenue enhancements over the last 2 years, including the measurable financial benefits from recommendations in effect from prior audits and prior years as well. We estimate more than $68 million has been realized during the last biennium as a result of our audit recommendations. However, in addition to the financial aspect of our audits, and arguably more important than the financial aspect, many of our audits focus on program activities that can significantly impact the lives of Nevada citizens. Some of those examples include our recent the Department of Corrections audit covering use of force practices, our DCFS audit looking at assessments and safety of child placements, as well as our reviews of children's facilities. This document also includes information regarding the implementation of audit recommendations. And our follow-up process for audits helps answers that question, how do we know that the recommendations have been implemented? Our audit follow-up process was put into statute by this fine body back in 1987, which I'm sure many of you were not here at that time. But that process has been recognized by the Government Accountability Office as a best practice in the country. And I'd like to take a couple minutes today to describe that audit follow-up process because we often get questions about that. For each audit report in the publication, you will find an audit highlights page that summarizes the key findings from our report. And depending on the timing of that report, you may also find in the publication the 6-month report, as well as my office's report to the Audit Subcommittee of the Legislative Commission on the status of recommendations. So let me talk just briefly about the follow-up process. It begins with a requirement for agencies who've been audited to submit a plan of corrective action 60 working days after the audit is issued. That plan describes the steps that the agencies intend to take to correct any issues or problems based on our recommendations. We review that plan to ensure that the agency's proposed plan aligns with those recommendations. Next, the Governor's Finance Office, Internal Audit Division, is required to submit a 6-month report to our office indicating the status of each recommendation. So about 5 months after that 6-month report comes out, Internal Audit will reach out to those agencies and begin a review process to determine the status of implementation. And that may include various steps that they deem appropriate for them to review and understand the current status. That report is then provided to our office. After we receive that report, we then review the status of those recommendations and work with agencies on any that are not fully implemented until the next meeting of the Legislative Commission, Audit Subcommittee of the Legislative Commission. We submit a report to the subcommittee indicating our assessment of the implementation status. And at those meetings, agencies have an opportunity to answer questions about the status of recommendations. After we present this information to the Audit Subcommittee, we'll continue to track and monitor the status of those recommendations that have not been fully implemented until they've been implemented to the satisfaction of the Audit Subcommittee as well as my office. Implementation of some recommendations sometimes takes some time and can be hindered by other factors that include agency vacancies, competing interests, and things of the like. However, we continue to monitor the status of recommendations until they are all implemented, and in some cases, request agencies to continue to return to future Audit Subcommittee meetings until they are completely we're satisfied with the implementation. In the publication today, we have 15 reports that we've included. If you have any questions about any of those audits in there, we are happy to make a presentation to you, to discuss an audit with you, to make a presentation at any of the committees during session as well. Our reports are available on our website, the full reports, as well as if you're interested in a full or a published copy, a hard copy, we'd be happy to provide that to you as well. Just in closing, I just would like to address the importance of Senate Finance and Assembly Ways and Means in the audit process. If agencies are not cooperating in taking appropriate corrective actions, then we can let you know. We view this committee's budget authority as the teeth, if you will, in the audit process. to helping ensure that agencies respond to our recommendations. However, I would add, though, that we do have a great working relationship with the vast majority of the agencies and have a very high rate of completion on successful implementation of recommendations. And we credit state agencies for taking our work seriously and putting forth efforts to make corrective actions. I'd say in general, and all agencies are very interested in taking seriously our recommendations and improving their operations. I'll just mention, too, that it's possible we'll be releasing some reports during session. The Audit Subcommittee's chair, Assemblywoman Howdegi, chair of that audit subcommittee, I'll notify her if there are any reports that are ready to be released, and at her discretion, we'll either hold a meeting of the audit subcommittee or we will release those reports. And then if there's any interest to hear them in any committee, we'd be happy to do so. And with that, that would conclude my presentation today, and be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you so much for the presentation. There's a lot of work that's been done in this book, and maybe I missed it. Is it just the three of you? How many people are in your department that actually put all this together?
Thank you, Chair, for the question. Dan Crossman, for the record. We have 32 professionals in our FTE. Not all of them are filled at the current moment, but we do have, looking for other good qualified people to fill those positions. But 32 audit staff and 2 support staff.
Great, thank you. We have a few questions. Senator Neal?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I have a question on the audit that you did for Department of Corrections. And it's not, I believe it was 2020 though, not 21. It was the one with the medical copays, and it also had information on the deductions that they were taking. What movement has the Department of Corrections done on the medical copay piece, where it was cited in the audit that they were charging inmates the medical copay and they didn't have the ability to pay it, and these fees would follow them post-release as a debt?
Thank you for the question, Senator Neal. That audit was actually released by the Division of Internal Audit under the Governor's Finance Office. So I would have to look into that a little bit more for you, but I'm sure they have. They could probably speak better to the specific implementation of that at this time.
Thank you for that. So I didn't know there was a difference. So do they interact with you at all, or they do their own thing and then you find out about it?
For the record, Dan Crossman, Legislative Auditor. Yeah, so we are separate entities. They do work at the direction of the Governor's office and the committee they report to. Our work is done through a separate process. They do assist us through the 6-month process where they look at our recommendations and visit the agencies to ensure that those recommendations have been implemented.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Any other questions? Assemblywoman Howdegi.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to say thank you to Mr. Crossman and his team. I'm having chaired the subcommittee, the audit subcommittee. I've seen the amount of work that they do. And like Mr. Crossman said, they've been doing it with some vacancies, and the amount of hours that go into each single audit, and then the follow-up, making sure that the corrective action plans are being followed up, is amazing. And like Mr. Crossman said, it's a model for the nation. So thank you for the work that you and your team do.
Assemblywoman Brown-May.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for the presentation. You have done an audit in the presentation material for the Rehabilitation Division for the Department of Employment Training and Rehabilitation. And it notes here that they need to spend an average of $814,000 more per year. My question, though, is relative to the timing of the budget. I've heard previously, and I may have misunderstood, it's something to do between the timing of the federal grant match dollars that we're required to spend as part of this pre-employment transition services. Does that create any difficulty within this budget, or did you identify that in the audit?
Chair Monroe Moreno, through you to Assemblywoman Brown-May. For the record, my name is Shannon Rydell. I'm the Chief Deputy Legislative Auditor. For the Rehabilitation Division audit, The PREETS program has a spending requirement that then coincides with the adult rehabilitation program. So they are required to spend a certain amount on the PREETS program in order to kind of drive the spending for the adult program. As far as timing goes, I'm not sure that there's a timing variable or component that comes into that, as far as it's just a component of the federal dollars that they receive needs to be spent on the PREETS program, the amount that they can spend on the adult program. Does that answer your question?
You're welcome. Members, any other questions? Senator Titus.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good morning, and thank you. I think it's a critical component to our state's budget system to have agencies audited. I'm sorry if you said this already, but how often do you cycle through the audit process for each agency? I mean, do you get to them every 4 years? Is there a set pattern that you work through every single department? First question.
Thank you for the question. For the record, Dan Crossman, Legislative Auditor, Senator Titus. Our process of performing audits or selecting agencies to audit begins with a risk assessment. Every 2 years, we will prepare a risk assessment looking at all of the agencies of the state, as well as their divisions and significant programs. We will look at various factors, including the last time they were audited, the amount of revenues, items of interest in the news, legislative interest, things of that nature. And we perform a risk assessment to identify which agencies we will include in our biennial audit plan, which we present to the audit or the Legislative Commission for approval. So it really depends on the agency. With our limited resources and the type of audits that we do, they do take a bit of time. So we don't have the opportunity to get into every agency as frequently as maybe we would like to. But a larger agency, it may be 4 years in between audits. On a smaller agency, it could be much longer than that by the time we get in there again.
So what would you say, to follow up on that then, what would you say would be the outside on some of these agencies? How long has it been in between audits?
For the record, Dan Crossman, Legislative Auditor. On some small divisions, it could be 15 years between audits. Generally because we don't see as high of a risk there in their programs. Now, could we do work in those agencies? Sure. And are there things that we could look at from a performance audit perspective? Sure. But at times it may be a number of years.
But you have no absolute, I hear what you're saying then. So your process is really one based on risk, not based on when the last one was done. And some outliers could be 15 years or so.
For the record, Dan Crossman, Legislative Auditor. Yes, that is correct. Now, that's a long time, 15 years. I'm kind of throwing that out as a worst case scenario probably. But on general, I would say average 6-7 years maybe between agencies, between audits.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Somewhere in that range.
Thank you for the question, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Assemblywoman Dickman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And that last exchange answered one of my questions, but I just wanted to say what a privilege it's been to serve on the Audit Subcommittee, and very eye-opening, and I just really appreciate the work you do and the things you find. It's incredible. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. And seeing no other questions, I thank you for joining us this morning. And thank you for the work that you're doing, and you're probably going to get a few more audits coming out of this session. Sorry, but necessary. And with that, we will move on to the next item on our agenda, which will be the governor's office. You got a little exercise getting up and down earlier. So, we have Ms. Stevenson from the Governor's Office of Finance and Mr. Kiekeffer. Welcome back. How's it feel to be on that side?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I presented a couple of bills from over here before. I appreciate it. I know I was not on the agenda, but I decided to party crash, if that's okay. My name is Ben Kiekeffer. I'm the Chief of Staff for Governor Joe Lombardo. It's an honor to be here to present the Governor's Office budget Account 1000. I know that you guys have spent the past couple weeks looking at a lot of PowerPoints. I decided that you probably didn't need that for 5 decision units within a single budget account. So happy to talk about what is in the governor's requested budget for his office for the next 2 fiscal years. And wanted to start by talking a little bit about a couple of items that are not specifically in the budget, but that will be coming in future policy bills or budget implementation bills, depending on how they get split out. My experience in the governor's office started back in about 2008, when I was serving in the Gibbons administration. And my first, there was a big wildfire up at Lake Tahoe, and we had a joint signing of a document between Governor Gibbons at the time and Governor Schwarzenegger at the time. And it sort of highlighted for me at the moment just how different our 2 states might run, because it was, I think, me and the governor and the chief of staff at the time, and I think one security detail riding in one car up to the document signing ceremony, and Governor Schwarzenegger rolled in with what must have been 12 SUVs full of people and like swarms of folks rolling out. And while I knew I never wanted to be quite like that, I also knew that the governor's office at that point was understaffed and underfunded. I think starting in my first legislative session in 2011, I said that on the record during, I think, this budget hearing when probably Senator Gansert was chief of staff to Governor Sandoval. That this office has historically been under-resourced, and the folks in the governor's office spend the majority of their time working directly with department heads and putting out fires and trying to manage state departments rather than sort of leading strategic initiatives for the state and trying to advance the governor's agenda. And I tried to say that, I think, in every budget hearing, regardless of who was governor. I believe I did. You'd have to go back through the minutes and find out if I'm fully accurate in that. But I'm in the unique position now to try to move that forward and try to create a structure that I think will serve the state better from a strategic planning standpoint, from a management standpoint, and one that will put not only the governor I serve, but all future governors in a better position to implement an agenda that they set forward for the state. So there are a couple of key items that will be coming forward in future bills. The first would be to amend NRS 281.123, which would eliminate the 95% salary cap on state employees. As I'm sure you're aware, employees are limited to 95% of the governor's salary, with the exception of physicians, dentists, and anyone who works for NSHE. So we would propose eliminating that provision as a component of addressing the state's ability to attract and retain positions in high demand, high need areas. The second piece of legislation that'll come forward, whether it's in the same bill or not, well, just to be determined, is going to be the creation of what we envision as cabinet secretaries within the governor's office. And these positions will serve as sort of that intermediary layer between staff within the governor's office and management of the executive functions of the state. And so we have included in our budget as enhancement unit 225. All right, I got that one right. 225, funding for 5 cabinet secretary positions for the next 2 years that will be charged with this sort of transition into this new sort of structure of executive branch management. So the E225 unit captures sort of salary as well as all of the ancillary costs of those 5 cabinet secretary positions. There's no administrative support in there. We believe that we should be able to roll in administrative support within the existing governor's office functions for the next 2 years as we sort of make this transition. And then we would probably propose building out those offices in the subsequent biennium. So that is the major decision unit within this budget. The E226 unit is sort of a little bit of a work in progress. It is salary adjustments in the governor's office, but there are some issues over how that number was calculated, and Ms. Stevenson is going to be working with LCB fiscal staff to button that down. That's probably elevated. The other enhancement unit is standard equipment replacement for the governor's office pursuant to the EATS replacement schedule. So that is the governor's office budget in a nutshell. The five position increases are related specifically to the cabinet secretary positions. Other than that, it remains fairly flat and rolls up. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions, and it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for the presentation. We do have a few questions for you. We'll start with my vice chair, Senator John Darrell.
Thank you very much. Can you kind of discuss these proposed positions and what they're actually going to entail? I'm not sure I'm clear on what each one of those 5 positions is.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate it. So they would have ultimately similar responsibilities for the management of a programmatic area of state government. So think of it more traditionally like Secretary of Education and Workforce, Secretary of Commerce and Labor, and then different departments of the state government would be organized underneath those secretary positions to help address those departments' needs on a day-to-day basis and interface with them on behalf of the governor. So, right now, the way the governor's office is scheduled, and you've probably seen these matrices from previous administrations, every sort of mid to senior staff position within the governor's office is assigned sort of a liaison contact within a different branch of state government. So for example, Superintendent Ebert, the System of Higher Education, and Rebecca Fiden are reporting directly to me as the Chief of Staff. Our General Counsel will have a whole suite of departments. And then, so when they have issues, they have questions, they have things that come up, they're coming directly to senior staff within the governor's office to get those issues addressed. So that then moves us out of any sort of strategic effort on behalf of the governor's agenda. It moves us out of, the big policy initiatives that we're trying to implement. And you do a lot of firefighting. So the idea is to have these positions be gubernatorial appointees who then interface directly on behalf of the governor within these programmatic areas to sort of take that responsibility out of senior staff of the governor's office and put it more into these new offices that will then help coordinate that. I mean, as you can imagine, my calendar starts every day pretty full, and I'm spending about 60% of my time on stuff that's not on my calendar. So, it's the nature of the job, but I think that if we can shift some of those types of issues into these new offices, it will give the governor's office more time to govern.
Follow up, Madam Chair. Go ahead. So I appreciate what you're saying. This world's the same, right?
Of course.
Start the day and the calendar's full.
Absolutely.
And,
understood.
I guess what I'm not for or against. I'm just trying to understand. I'm a little bit confused because if I'm Superintendent Ebert or Public Safety or whatever director I am, I feel like we're adding another layer because at some point that person has to go to you or has to go to Ms. Stevenson, has to go to whoever. Am I correct or am I hearing that wrong?
No, it creates an intermediary layer. Absolutely. It's designed to. But a lot of the questions that cabinet officials oftentimes come to us with are probably not things that need to be elevated to us, whether it's questions about an amendment on a piece of legislation, whether it's a budgetary question that they need to get asked, whether it's press release stuff and getting a quote from the governor, things like that that don't necessarily need to be elevated up to the chief of staff of the governor, that could be managed more efficiently by an intermediary who's authorized and empowered by the governor to act on their behalf. Right? Ultimately still responsible to the chief of staff, but creates that sort of buffer that frees the governor's office staff to implement their jobs more efficiently.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I'll let others go.
Assemblywoman Hadigi.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I just have a question on the same budget account, E225. So I'm just curious, I'd like more information as to why we're eliminating or repealing NRS 281123. Why is a 200,000 salary good, but a 161,000 salary not good enough? Why isn't 95% good enough?
Yeah, thank you. Ben Keekever for the record. I appreciate the question, Assemblywoman Hadigi. Madam Chair, through you to the Assemblywoman. Look, the issue over the 95% salary cap, I think, is one that can be addressed regardless of these positions specifically. I think that there are problems that salary cap creates outside of this cabinet level secretary position. The compression being one of the first ones. As we're trying to elevate the salaries of state employees, the downward pressure from that 95% salary cap is is compressing our salary structure pretty significantly within the state. There are a lot of departments where people make more than the people who supervise them. The Department of Corrections being a case in point, people refuse to be promoted because they actually make less money, and that structure needs to be addressed. We have our so all of the sort of dynamics of creating a salary structure for state government that I think functions efficiently is being burdened by the 95% salary cap. And frankly, if a governor has such thin skin that he or she can't deal with some of their employees making more than them, they should probably find another job. I mean, that's not the issue, I think. I think it was created for this power structure so that the governor remains at the top. But the governor's on top by law, right? The governor's on top by his or her election, and I don't think they need their salary to be the highest in the state in order to prove it to everybody. So I think this would allow us to more efficiently manage salary issues within state government and try to attract and retain people in IT, CPAs, attorneys, other folks throughout state government outside of these 5 positions that we have a very, very difficult time recruiting because they can make double that in the private sector. And look, I don't think we should ever pin ourselves to say we're going to pay people as much as they're going to be able to make in the private sector, but we shouldn't be making it so difficult that no one would want to do it. And I think we need to be honest about that. So I think the 95% issue is outside of these 5 positions. And then the $200,000 salary that I pin these at is because they're sort of at the highest level of government as they're envisioned within this structure, outside of the chief of staff and the governor. They'll be making more than I make. But again, I'm okay with that too. It's it's a number that I picked. It's not necessarily based on science, but I thought it was a number that would be a sign that we're taking them seriously and empowering them to do the jobs that we're asking them to do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Senator Ganzert.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And since I've been in your position before, I know, I was just trying to count here, but you have almost like 20 agencies that you have to oversee at the governor's office level. And I know we had like 3 people to divide that amongst. And so how many people right now are you dividing sort of the management of different agencies? Because I think we ended up having to use like legal counsel to oversee some, and then the chief of staff, deputy chief of staff. So just like an idea of how many people you have to actually oversee all of this.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to Senator Ganser. We've diffused it consistent with the prior administration. I think we've diffused it pretty widely. So it's not just our sort of 6 senior staff folks, but we have probably 5 additional people who are helping or who are serving as the liaison contacts for different offices. So it's not just the sort of traditional departments as are created in the statute, but we need people who to answer to for the Gaming Control Board, for the Patient Protection Commission, for all of these different functions of government, need a point of contact in the governor's office. So it's spread out fairly broadly within the governor's office.
Right, and so, and most of those people have other duties, right? So everybody has another duty, they're another responsibility, and then they have to oversee whatever else that you need. And I know during the Sandoval administration, when we had some research folks in-house, we only could pay them $50,000 a year. You know, and we were trying to get highly qualified people, and the only reason they would come in was to sort of they liked the governor, and they wanted to help out, but it was difficult. And I know you've probably had challenges too when you go to try to hire your cabinet level positions as well.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair, through you to Senator Genscher. Look, no one, I think everyone is proud to serve in Governor Lombardo's administration. We are all here because we believe in the agenda, we believe in the governor, we believe in service to the state. You know, I think a large number of folks took pay cuts to take these jobs, and that's okay. That's fine. That's part of the deal, and I think everybody gets that. The same is true with trying to recruit people into department director jobs. You know, but I think these positions in particular are designed to be sort of that next level up, and you know, I think that when you talk about the salary cap in particular, it will provide this body more flexibility to think about what you put into the unclassified pay bill, right? All of these are salaries that are fixed based on the unclassified pay bill that comes out every 2 years, and I think it'll give us all more flexibility for what we envision. For these, for these positions, our cabinet, our department directors, you know, make $140-something thousand, right? And you're asking them to manage multi-billion-dollar budgets with thousands of people in them, and that's a tall ask, and it's sometimes hard to find people who are who you'd want to appoint who are able to do it for that dollar figure.
Just sort of the last question about, I know that this administration has a goal of being open for business, right? Being open and responsive. And so do you think that having these extra positions will help be more responsive, the administration be more responsive, all the agencies allow them to be more responsive, whether it's an individual or if it's businesses, you know, being open for business and being open and responsive is super important. And so do you think these people are going to help you be able to quicken the pace of government to better serve the people?
Absolutely. Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to Senator Genscher. Absolutely. And that's part of the mission, to make government more effective in what we are designed to do. And Governor Lombardo has sat down and told me, look, state government is a service organization, and we need to think about it like that. And what we need to be focused on is service to the people, and everything that we do should be focused on that mission. So the ability for department directors to get more or a quicker turnaround on response because they have someone more dedicated to that will be, I think, aid in that mission. And it'll also free up the governor's office to focus on how we can strategically effectuate that mission over the long term.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a question for you. So you just said that these were fixed salaries, but in the unclassified pay bill. But these positions are actually, as presented to us, as non-classified, correct?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ben Kika, for the record. The position, the cabinet secretary positions that are proposed in our budget are non-classified as members of the governor's office. I was speaking specifically to the department director positions that are in the unclassified pay bill.
Okay, so there would be 5 positions now. So coming back, looking towards the future with the workload that these 5 people may have, what other staff are they going to need? How is that also going to impact the budget moving forward?
Yeah, thank you. That's an important question. Ben Kiekever for the record. And I've thought about it from a number of different avenues, and this is step one. right? This is a proposal to start with 5 individuals who can help then, I think, create the structure that they're going to need or that they see long-term to build out the infrastructure that they need. And I would rely on them to come back with a proposal that we would bring to the legislature in 2025 to offer that up. I could see as many as 7 total cabinet secretary positions to align with the programmatic areas of state government. We're proposing 5 now to sort of launch the process and try to create a structure that's going to work. And then I would ultimately expect that they were going to need additional support, different, not just administrative, but potentially budgetary as well, working with the governor's finance office. Our vision is to make these functional offices that are able to effectively manage their areas of interest. So to tell you what that's going to look like 2 years down the road, I don't know, because I'm going to be relying on some of these individuals to help build that out. But this is a start. It's not the end point.
So when these individuals, if approved, come on board, they'll be working by themselves with the directors of the departments that they're going to be the cabinet secretary over, and not have an administrative staff coming with them.
Ben Kiekever, for the record. So they would be incorporated into the governor's office, and they would have the administrative support of the governor's office as they function for the next 2 years.
Okay. Assemblywoman Brown-May.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you. In my private life, I have the opportunity to oversee a human resources department. And so I just want to go back on one of your comments where you said you picked the $200,000 salary. Is there scientific data? Is there a wage band or rates analysis? And in many of the divisions, when we determine our rates for services we pay, we often do rate studies, right? And then we identify wage bands or rate bands where we are offering rates at the 50th percentile or 75th percentile. I'm curious to know what scientific research, is there a wage band, data analysis, or comparative to other states that potentially support this proposal? Just curious to know.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair, to you too, Assemblywoman Brown-May. I thought it might be dangerous to go out and do an evaluation of CEO salaries as an idea of what this might cost, because I figured I might have a hard time getting that average through this body. But I think that it's feasible to go out and do some comparative analysis for what exists in perhaps other states. But in terms of a comparative to the private sector, I see these as sort of corporate CEO type of positions with subject matter expertise. And I think that would be dangerous to go out and compare against. But I mean, ultimately, again, we had to put a number into the budget request. It was an elevated number that exceeded the 95% that I thought was certainly justifiable. Probably under what a lot of people would still be making in the private sector if they were doing it out there. But we can do an analysis of what exists in other states. I think that would probably be a better analysis as to what's happening in the private sector. Thanks.
Thank you. Senator Harris?
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question is related to creating new positions as opposed to, let's say, paying some of our current heads of agencies a little bit more. If you look at the federal government, the cabinet is made up of existing heads of agencies, right? You don't have an intermediate level. So we already have a head of DHHS. We already have theoretically a secretary of the Treasury who could be our treasurer, right? I mean, some of these positions are already in fact in existence. Did you consider maybe paying those folks a little bit more, possibly expanding their portfolios where it might not exist? For example, the head of DHHS could now become the Secretary of Health and pick up contact for the Patient Protection Commission, right, where they don't normally have jurisdiction, right? Why not use our existing heads, pay them a little bit more, elevate them to the cabinet positions, bring them into the governor's office a little bit more, as opposed to adding a layer of a whole bunch of, 5 new folks?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to Senator Harris. Look, I don't think your question is sort of misaligned with what I think we're trying to do. And I'm sure that Treasurer Conine would be happy to get a pay bump and give him more responsibility. He's been asking for a treasurer's mansion for some time now, which he may have presented to this body. I don't know. But you know, look, I guess I would argue right now that some of our directors are already sort of overstretched in some of their responsibilities, and adding to that, certainly some departments could probably absorb more. Some probably need to be diffused a little bit. And it's not a small number of like just a board here and a board there that are outside of their general purview. I mean, a lot of the services between Department of Health and Human Services and the Department of Employment Training and Rehabilitation overlap, right? There are overlaps between some issues in DETR and some issues in Department of Education. You know, I mean, you see it in this body. Your subcommittee your Health, Human Services subcommittee reviews the budgets of DETR and DHHS because they're programmatically similar, and I think some of the same thought process is going into what we're trying to create. So, in some of the reviews that we're looking at, it's a list of 12, 13, 14 statutorily created entities that then circle up underneath these cabinet secretary positions. So it's not just a couple little one-offs here and there. You know, but I think your statement about the idea of elevating some of our department directors is also warranted, and if there are ways to give them more responsibility, more pay, and sort of extend their skill set, I'm all ears for that. I want to put people to their highest and best use always.
Thank you. I'd just encourage you maybe to look at other ways to shift around the $200,000 per person and maybe increase a department, give people the staffing they need, considering they're currently understaffed, right? With some maybe support positions, a lot of our agency heads could potentially act as cabinet secretaries, you know, in the same sense that our federal government does. But those staffing problems are, as I'm sure you know, existent whether or not we add this new layer. And so those issues will have to be addressed regardless. Thank you.
Thank you. Madam Chair, may I quickly respond? Yeah, certainly. Through you to Senator Harris, look, our vacancies and fully staffing the departments with the authorized positions that this body creates for them is also a top priority. And if we can fully staff out our existing positions, that would take us in a significant step in the right direction. And we are working diligently to do that. Our director of the Department of Administration has had workshops with all department heads to talk about giving them more authority over their hiring process, to really allow them to manage their departments, right? And so I think a lot of what you're talking about is on point. The governor believes in delegation and accountability, and I think this administration is going to be trying to give department directors the power and trust to manage their departments more effectively, which will streamline hiring, which will hopefully allow us to absorb some positions that, not absorb positions, fill positions more quickly. And so I think we're moving in the exact direction that you're talking about. Thank you.
Assemblywoman Anderson.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for presenting this information to us today. Mine is very similar to the Senator's questions. Over the last week and a half, 2 weeks, we've heard the incredibly depressing news from almost every single department that's come in saying there's 30% openings, there's 40%, et cetera. So for the governor's office, what are the current challenges faced with the existing staffing levels? What is the percentage of openings that you have, realizing, of course, that it's still in the transitional time frame between those? And then finally, what would be the benefits that are expected to result if these positions were in fact added?
Thank you. Ben Kiefer for the record, through you, Madam Chair, to Assemblywoman Anderson. Look, I've effectively filled my staff, right? We've filled out our positions. Governor's office is an amazing place to work, right? It's unique. The governor himself is a great leader who is inspiring and fun and friendly and jovial, and he's good to be around, and he's leading a good ship. And so it's a great place to work, and people are excited to be there. So filling out a governor's staff has not historically been the challenge, right? People are willing to make the sacrifice to be there. I don't. But the positions that are authorized within our office are filled. Ones that are dispersed throughout state government is an acute problem, and we heard that as we made this transition in, and we started having meetings with all the department heads to talk about issues that they were facing. It was a unanimous chorus from every department that filling vacancies was too difficult, too time consuming, process was slow, and these are problems that we can fix at the executive level, and we are fixing them at the executive level. And part of that is going to be empowering departments to do more hiring themselves and make decisions on their own rather than having to filter through multiple levels of bureaucracy in order to do it. I believe that help is on the way for our department heads, and they seem, from the feedback I've received, knowing that they all report to me, right? Happy about some of the changes that are being made, and it should allow them to address some of their vacancies and get them the support that they need and deserve and are authorized to have by this body. So hopefully that process is going to move forward. That we're going to be seeing proposals for salary increases that should hopefully address some of that issue as well. I look forward to those discussions. But these 5 positions in particular are designed to address some of those sort of higher level needs than day-to-day hiring within a department, right? So it is issues that departments feel like they need to get the governor's office of attention about, and these cabinet secretary positions will be the place that they go for that, rather than directly to the chief of staff, deputy chief of staff, general counsel, who may be dealing with the AG's office on litigation or implementing an entirely new HR system or whatever the issue may be. So it's more timely and efficient responsiveness from the governor's office to departments that allows them to solve problems more quickly.
Thank you, Chair, for the follow-up. So if I'm understanding correctly, then the benefits would be timeliness
Hopefully,
and getting things done quicker. That's the main reason to add these 5 individuals, is timeliness. Is that, I hate to have to do the Cliff Notes version of it, but is that what I'm understanding you're saying is timeliness is the main reason why we need these positions?
Ben Kiefer for the record, Madam Chair, through you to Ms. Anderson. Certainly, it's one component of it. It's ensuring that the governor's agenda is being implemented and clearly articulated on issues that may pop up during the course of any business day, right? I think that, and aligning areas within government that should naturally be aligned and may not be right now, right? So if we create an organizational structure that allows a person to be in charge that may have different offices that are related, but may not necessarily talk to each other on a daily basis because government is inherently siloed right now, then we can look for ways to create more efficiencies, to streamline processes, to make government more responsive to people. And that's the goal. Thank you.
You're welcome. Assemblyman Watts?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess two thoughts that I'd like to share on this. One, I think I am particularly interested in, as we review additional budgets, to see where the proposals are, because I think the issues with the salary cap for attracting or retaining talent in certain agencies or certain positions is an issue. So I look forward to seeing across other proposals where increases are being proposed to help us meet some of those critical needs. The other thing that I think is important to note is as we talk about issues with the ceiling, I think it's important that we also, and I think this was brought up by one of my colleagues, be aware of issues with the floor as well. So I'm at least interested in seeing how we get the state to be off the top list of employers whose employees are using Medicaid and other state services. So I just want to put that out there. But I wanted to also transition because one of the things that you brought up was that these positions, even though they're kind of going to be junior in the fact that they're taking some responsibilities off senior staff in the governor's office, are proposed to make more than some of the senior positions right now. And so I think that helps transition to E226, which is the salary increases. So could you just discuss, again, kind of how this number would be broken up, how it would increase the salaries of existing staff, and going back to kind of the similar theme, how that was arrived at as kind of an appropriate amount?
Yeah, I think I'm going to defer to Ms. Stevenson on some of these questions because there are numerous moving pieces. Some of it is calculations versus employer pay versus employer pay and how that was translated. Some of it is the absorption of some salary savings from the previous administration. Some of it was it relates to the fact that the governor's office has been bringing in department staff into the governor's office to serve them, and part of this effort is to actually true up and be more transparent about how much it's costing to run the governor's office instead of bringing in someone from a department to effectively be a governor's office employee. We're actually just trying to put them at a commensurate salary in the governor's office. So there are a lot of different moving pieces on this one, and Ms. Stevenson did the calculation, so I'm gonna give it to her.
Thank you. For the record, my name is Amy Stevenson, Director for Governor's Finance Office. Through you, Madam Chair, to Assemblyman Watts. So I think to answer your question, the E226 does not include an increase for the current governor's staff to be over, or to increase it over what the cabinet secretaries are being proposed. So what it is to be commensurate, because I don't believe that we discussed the cabinet secretaries were at the 200,000, and what we proposed in E226 was the governor's salary as it stands right now. Did that answer your question for that piece?
For the most part, it did. I'd love to just get a little bit of additional detail on what that looks like, but that it does. That was a bit of the question I had. I'm not 100% sure that makes sense, but it does provide some clarification. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Assemblywoman Peters.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I'm preparing myself to be a bit of the dunce today because I'm thinking about these new secretary positions and love the idea of more consistency, more coordination, better constituent services, and quicker process in government. And I think you've touched on a couple of things around, well, if we could fill all the positions, maybe we would get there. If we could keep people in for 10 years, like that would be great because then we'd have consistency and people who have built process that works. But what I'm not connecting here is what is the authority and role of the secretaries in the governor's office. I think you've said bits and pieces of like management, coordination, efficiencies, making sure that the governor's agenda is being followed. But what does that translate to in authority of those offices? What would they be doing that can't be done now with the people in place, or is overloaded on other people? Like, what are those pieces that are being pulled out?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to Assemblywoman Peters. So ultimately, under the statutory construction of the governor's office now, the governor has the authority to empower his employees to, basically in whatever way he or she wants, right? And the statute is very broad in delegating authority to the governor to provide authority for whatever functions he or she chooses. So ultimately, it'll be at the discretion of the governor to decide the level of authority that any individual cabinet secretary would have. I think our office, like in these first 2 years, this will be a transition period, and we'll have to figure that out in some ways. But the vision and the mission is to provide sort of broad authority to these cabinet secretary positions to work directly with department heads and agency heads, to have decision-making authority over sort of a wide variety of issues that they may have, whether it's they have questions about hiring an individual, whether there are questions about budgetary issues, whether there are questions about, well, maybe not whether to, I'll stop there. But there are, I think that our vision is to give broad authority to these individuals to make decisions on behalf of the governor's office. They would be part of the governor's office staff, part of the governor's office structure, and they would carry with it that authority.
I just want to make a comment about some of the trends that I see in government, and I work with executive branch in my day job. And I think that what you're getting at, to me, is that we just don't have the higher end resources and the higher end trust in our agencies to get the work done that needs to get done. And to me, that's a cultural issue, right? That we have maybe perpetuated a culture of distrust of our agency heads in this state. And I don't know if that's a result of just not being able to recruit the people who need to be in those positions, if it's a result of not addressing fundamental and foundational cultural problems within those agencies. And this is something I've talked about for the last 2 sessions, right? That we have to start treating the professionals at the state of Nevada as the professionals that they are, and with the respect and deference that they deserve in those positions. And I don't know if I see it adding an additional layer as doing that, but I hope that in addition to these requests, the governor's office looks at strategically building that relationship with the existing offices, and how can we ensure that that culture is retained beyond the governor's tenure, and make sure that that the state is a place where employees want to be, and we're able to recruit and retain the ones that help us move our state forward.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If I may respond to Assemblywoman Peters, amen. Right, that is, I think, the exact vision that Governor Lombardo has. He's very proud of his cabinet. Right, that we do have professionals in place in the positions over executive branches of state government, and he, as I said earlier, he believes in delegating and holding people accountable. Right, so that if people are empowered to run a department, they should be able to run that department, and they shouldn't have to ask for permission every time they want to hire somebody or move a little money around or do whatever it might be to effectively run their department and serve the people of the state. And we have created structures that are barriers to effective management. And some of them we're trying to address immediately that we can through the administrative code and the state and the state administrative manual, and our director of the Department of Administration is currently working through that process. But Heck yeah, we want to empower our departments to be run by the people we trust to run them. And our vision is that we're here to support them in doing that. So, right on. Thank you.
I look forward to that Department of Administration's report.
Okay, we'll have our last question on budget account 101-1000 from Senator Neal.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the question that I have, so under the NRS 281-123, what did you research behind the actual legislative intent on why that statute was actually brought into place? Because that's what's not in the record, is the public policy purpose behind it, the intent on why it was created, saying that other persons cannot earn more than the governor, right? And so inherently, when you read the language, that means that there is an internal check that was anticipated to remain from 75 forward. And so could you put that on the record?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to Senator Neal, our intent is the practical implementation. So if it comes to the intent of when the statute was created, I do not know the answer to that. What I can say is that the practical effect means that it's incredibly difficult to hire engineers for the State Division of Water Resources. It's incredibly difficult to hire IT professionals. It puts downward compression on salaries of other employees in the state because we can't give them raises that are large enough so that they don't exceed the salaries of the people who are supervising them. So the practical effect of that statute, regardless of its original intent, I think is having a negative impact on our ability to manage state government.
So, thank you, Madam Chair. Just a quick follow-up. So, I've listened to the arguments, but we're not just talking about regular employees. We're talking about within the executive branch, and we're talking about individuals who are going to do additional work. And I think original intent does matter because for me it falls along whether or not constitutionally, right, we are operating within our separations of powers, being that the legislature is being asked to repeal a statute that then allows a cap to be removed. And the history behind that is very important to determine the public policy need, purpose, intent. We can operate on the pragmatist belief, but it's also important to understand why exactly it was in place in the first place. Because if the legislature says, okay, well, within our authority, we decide to repeal the statute to allow folks to then make $200K, and then they can continue to make more and more money after that, there is a discussion, right, about whether or not the basis of that salary fits the public policy purpose of the original historical intent, right? Because the legislature clearly has the power to say no. So that is the check. And so I really do want to understand historically and intent why it was put in place in the first place, because that helps to guard whether or not we're doing appropriate business when we think about the function of government in totality of what it's supposed to do within the three branches.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through to Senator Neal, look, when you said regular employees, like the vast majority of state employees are executive branch employees. I think they are sort of the standard for state employment. And the legislature sets the budgets on that, as you reference, right? So the idea that it would somehow result in runaway salaries for certain people, the constitutional offices are probably the only places that would be, and you'd get to revisit it every 2 years, right? Because you still appropriate a set amount of funding that can be used for those purposes. So the legislature continues to retain its authority. I'm not asking you to give it up. If you want to block grant money to the state, to the executive branch, I'd be happy to allocate it as I choose, but I don't think that's the purpose of this mission, right? In the unclassified pay bill, you control the salaries of every unclassified employee. You're really speaking specifically to those you would choose to award a salary to that's higher than 95% of the governor's salary, or the constitutional offices, and then we could easily have a discussion about separation of powers.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll only say this one thing, and I deeply respect you, Chief of Staff Keffer. I was getting ready to say, Senator.
Ben?
If you were on this side of the dais, would you make the same decision? Would you ask very key questions to try to understand what is the need and the public policy purpose behind it? Being if it was a different person that you didn't serve.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to Senator Neal, I believe I have. And yes, I should have gone back and tried to find the minutes from every governor's office budget hearing. But I think that in every one where I was a member of your body, and I sat in that chair, that I said on the record that the governor's office needed more resources to do its job, and it was underfunded. And I believe I said that when the prior administration was here, as well as the one before that. But that certainly does not mean that I don't think you should do your job, right, and ask the questions that you're asking, and you always do, and I appreciate that about you. It's one of the things that I like most. So, no, absolutely. These are the questions I was expecting, and I don't have a full answer on all of them, but I'll get it to you. And I look forward to the debate more, because this will be coming as a part of a piece of legislation that we'll be able to have a full hearing on.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you. We do have one more question from Senator Gokachia.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And just very quickly, again, we're not talking about repealing 281, the statute. We're only allowing these 5 positions, correct?
Thank you, Madam Chair. To Senator Goycochea, no, we're talking about eliminating the whole thing. And we think that there are areas of need outside of the governor's office, probably more acutely than the governor's office. And I'd point to the Division of Water Resources as one that you might be familiar with.
I wanted to get that on the record. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. And that was our last question for the Office of the Governor, Budget 101-1000. So we'll close the hearing on that and open for the Governor's Mansion Maintenance, Budget 101-1001. And as soon as you're ready, you can start.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ben Keffer for the record, Chief of Staff to Governor Joe Lombardo. Budget account 1001 is the Governor's Mansion Maintenance budget. This is a pretty flat budget that just includes a couple of M units for fringe and statewide inflation, and then the enhancement of E710, specifically related to, I believe, a laptop. The maintenance in buildings and grounds is consistent with some additional upkeep of the people's house that needs to be maintained, and that is the extent of it. I was speaking with Kristen Dillard, who runs the mansion on behalf of the state, and we may come back to this body to ask for a small increase in in-state travel for the First Lady. She's going to be planning to be very active, and we may need a small increase there, but that's more of a foreshadow of a request that may be forthcoming, rather than something that's in the budget as it's currently presented to you. With that, we'd be happy to take any questions.
It's interesting you say a flat budget. There's a huge increase here from previous bienniums. We have a few questions. We'll start with Assemblyman Miller.
All right, got a new mic, figuring it out. Thank you. Thank you for the question, for the time, Chair. Thank you all for being here today. It looks like there's as you mentioned, Chair, a pretty significant increase from the previous bienniums until now. From 2021, it looks like it's almost an $800,000 increase. So we're looking at going from about $29,000 to $265,000. Looks like there are some significant projects and works being done, but Can you kind of go through a bit of the scope of what you're looking to complete?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to defer to Ms. Stevenson to talk about the deferred maintenance projects that are included in this budget. But I think the vast majority of the increase that you're talking about is related to physical maintenance of the plant.
Hello, Chair. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry.
Give me a chance first, and then you can, through you, Madam Chair, to Assemblyman Miller. Some of the projects in the governor's mansion budget for that deferred maintenance is replacing the carpet. There's an HVAC, which is not cheap. And there's some other, I'm trying to remember all of them, but it's like redoing of floors and maintenance of the governor's mansion.
Some floors and maintenance and HVAC. Okay. Okay. Good deal. So with all that you are looking to do, we're expecting this to be completed by 2025?
Amy Stevenson, Governor's Finance Office. For the record, through you, Madam Chair, to Assemblyman Miller. Assemblyman Miller. Okay, let's try this again. To you, sir. Yes, we hope to have that all completed, the deferred maintenance, in that fiscal year.
Okay. Good deal. So I just have one last question. So I noticed here in we've got like 75,000 here in the wallpaper and mansion apartment and stateroom. I'm also somewhat new to, governor transitions and ways and means and all of this. So can you provide some understanding from my knowledge? Are these just aesthetic things that, we're transitioning because we want to or we like them, or are they absolutely necessary improvements?
Thank you. Amy Stevenson, for the record, through you, Madam Chair, to Assemblyman Miller. These are things that we would have put in regardless of the transition. So these are things that had to have been done to the governor's mansion.
Senator John Darrell Loop.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I hear you saying that these are things that would be done regardless. When was the last time that things were replaced, like, and I don't mean a broken kitchen cabinet, I mean like concrete planters, which I get, they're probably aesthetic versus broken. But when was the last time that some of these things were done?
Amy Stevenson, for the record, through you, Madam Chair, to John Darrell Loop. I will have to get back to you on that. I have to double check that replacement schedule.
Thank you very much. I just feel like I remember some of this from before in another world, in another setting. Landscape plantings, concrete planters, things like that start to add up. I was just curious about. I, of all Nevadans, would love for the mansion to look beautiful. It's no secret my parents lived behind it one time, so it's wonderful that we have it, but I think we have to also be judicious of what we're doing and, maybe do it differently, like not all at once or something.
Madam Chair, if I may, Ben Kiekover, for the record, through you to your Vice Chair. Certainly, I know the last time there was a significant overhaul of the governor's mansion was in the Gwynn administration, is when a lot of the sort of structural components were overhauled and the building was truly refreshed. And this isn't at that level by any stretch, but these are deferred maintenance projects that Buildings and Grounds felt were necessary. And this was an agency request. We didn't make any changes to this request after the transition. So this was something that was in the works since back in the spring.
Thank you very much. I just, for some reason in my mind, I remembered either with Governor Sandoval or Governor Sisolak, one of them, carpet was replaced or painting was done, some maintenance was done. I just don't remember what, and that's why I was asking.
If I may follow up, Chair. Amy Stevenson, Director of Governor's Finance Office, through you to Vice Chair Don Loop. This list of it is through State Public Works, and I'll get that schedule, but they're the ones who maintain the schedule of replacement that we're asking for. You're welcome.
Thank you. Members, any other questions? Okay, see none. I thank you for joining us today and presenting the hearings on these two budgets. We will see more of you. Look forward to getting more information about the replacement schedule, the maintenance schedules, and the cabinet positions.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I look forward to it.
And with that, we will close the hearing on budget 1001 from the governor's office. And we will move on to the lieutenant governor's office. And members, we're going to take it just a little bit out of order. We're going to start with budget 1020 and then move on after we close that hearing to 1021. So welcome. I believe this is your first official hearing with our committee.
Yes, everything has been a first official, everything since I started a month ago, so this is all brand new to me. So good morning, Madam Chair. Good morning, members of the committee. Thank you for letting me go start first with the Lieutenant Governor's office. We'll go through that. Happy to answer any questions. And then we'll talk about the Office of Small Business Advocacy. So my name is Stavros Anthony. I am the Lieutenant Governor for Nevada. To my left is Rudy Paymantuan. He is my Chief of Staff. And to my right is Daniel Marlowe, who is with the Department of Administration, and he is the numbers guy. So I will defer to him when it comes to numbers. First, I wanted to just give you a quick outline of what the Lieutenant Governor's office is responsible for and what I am responsible for. I am the chair of the Tourism Commission, the vice chair of the Transportation Commission. I am a member of the Governor's Office of Economic Development. I am the chair of the Advisory Board on Outdoor Recreation. I am the chair of the Keep Nevada Working Task Force. I oversee the Office of Small Business Advocacy. I'm a member of the Executive Branch Audit Committee, a member of the Commission on Homeland Security. I chair the Cybersecurity Subcommittee. I am also the President of the Senate during the legislative session. And my most important commitment is I am committed to representing Southern Nevada, Northern Nevada, and the rurals in every single one of these commissions and committees and anything I do as Lieutenant Governor. Let's see. So that's what the Lieutenant Governor does. I'm now going to turn it over to Rudy Paymantuan, my Chief of Staff, who will talk about the specific enhancements in the budget.
Thank you, Lieutenant Governor. Madam Chair, members, thank you and good morning. I'm just going to go over the 7 enhancements in our budget for your review that you have in front of you. We're requesting E235. This is a request to fund 4 cell phones for the Lieutenant Governor's office. E227 is a request for a video conferencing system in the Las Vegas office. E226 is a request for a copier printer in the Las Vegas office. E125 is a request for membership in the Aerospace States Association. E225 is a request for in-state and out-of-state travel for Lieutenant Governor. And finally, 2 more. E229, this request funds 1 executive assistant and associated costs with that. And E710, standard computer replacements in the office. And I think I failed to state my name and spell my name for the record. We're new at this. So I'm Rudy Paymantuan, first name spelled R-U-D-Y, last name Paymantuan, P-A-M-I-N-Tuan. I'm Lieutenant Governor's Chief of Staff. And finally, before we do questions, I just want to take the opportunity to thank David Marlowe sitting here with us and Donald Carlson sitting behind us from administration and Brody Leiser sitting over there with LCB. We're new. We just transitioned in this office. Between our office and those three individuals, we spent countless of hours in meetings, live and virtually, to kind of go through this process. So I want to thank them here for the record for their hard work and dedication to the state of Nevada. So, Madam Chair, we'll entertain any questions you or the members may have.
Thank you. Let's go to E229. You have a request for an executive assistance position. And I believe in our backup documents, you want that position to start on July 1st, when customarily the starting dates would be October 1st for 2023. Can you explain why the accelerated date that you're requesting?
Thank you, Madam Chair, for that question. To answer that, currently we have only one FTE up here in the Carson City office. The request is to create another position to assist up here at the Carson City office. The reason why we have an earlier date to fill that position is we currently have a person that's an FTE in our Las Vegas office that we will then move into that position. So she's already employed at a lower labor category, and we're just going to shift her over to the next one.
Did I hear you correctly? So the person that would be in this position is currently in Las Vegas, and she would be shifting here to Carson City?
No, she will be shifting to the new position.
But she'll remain in Las Vegas?
Correct.
Okay.
Thank you.
And then if the start date is not approved, how will that impact your office? How will you still be able to function? What will you not be able to do if that hiring date is not approved? And the position.
Yeah, well, we'll just continue along, and if it is approved, I mean, it would be great if it was approved for July 1st. If it isn't, and it's approved for October 1st, we'll just plug along.
And then I may have missed it in the presentation. Exactly how many staff members do you have in Las Vegas and here in Carson City?
Yeah, so I have Chief of Staff, again, Stavros Anthony for the record. I have a Chief of Staff, Rudy. I have two senior advisors. One is up here, one is in the south. I have an administrative assistant that operates in the south. That's the person that I would like to make my executive secretary, because I have all these commissions and responsibilities. And then I wanted the other administrative assistant to be up here in the north for constituent services for the north, for the rural areas, to help with my senior advisor up here. So we would end up, I currently have 4. We're asking for one additional administrative assistant, because it's important for me, as I said, that the rurals in the north are represented just as much as the south. Thank you.
Thank you. Assemblyman Yeager?
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. Good to see you, Lieutenant Governor. I just wanted to say thank you for the membership in the Aerospace States Association, and wanted to encourage you to get involved with that organization. I think I maybe am the only legislator who's gone to a few of their events over the past few years with our 2 prior lieutenant governors, and I was a little dismayed to learn that we weren't actually paying dues as a state, which obviously has nothing to do with you, but it was a prior administration that made that determination. So certainly feel like it's our responsibility, if we're going to benefit from that association, to make sure we're a dues-paying member. And then again, just wanted to recommend, because I think there are a lot of exciting opportunities in Nevada, particularly in the drone space, that we could really take advantage of some of those connections. I mean, I learned a lot about just different companies that were operating in the state that I knew nothing about in the aerospace industry. So thank you for putting that in the budget. And if you can find time to get involved in that organization, I think it really would be a benefit, not just to yourself, but to Nevada as a whole, to look at those aerospace opportunities we might have.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Could I respond? Yeah, thank you for that. That's a great comment. And the other thing I want to put out there is any legislator that wants to get information about the aerospace industry through that association, please contact my office, and we'll get you involved and get you the information that you need, or if you'd like to attend a conference or something, absolutely.
Assemblywoman Bacchus?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Lieutenant Governor, for your presentation. I just had a quick question because you were talking about you already foresee the person that holds a position in the Las Vegas office who will be elevated to this newly created executive assistant position in Las Vegas. What position are they currently holding, and are you thinking about eliminating that position then in the Las Vegas office?
So they're currently an administrative assistant. They would be reclassified at a higher pay to executive assistant. They would stay where they currently are, and it would be, in my office, it would be me, chief of staff, senior advisor, and then the executive assistant or executive secretary. And then the current administrative assistant position would then, we would hire that person. They would be here in the Carson City office with the senior advisor that works up here to assist him in managing Lieutenant Governor's office in the north and in the rural areas, if that answers your question.
It does. Thank you.
Thank you.
Members, any other questions on budget 1020? All right. Seeing none, we will close the hearing on the Lieutenant Governor's budget 1020, and we will move on and open the hearing for the Office of Small Business Advocacy budget 1021.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, for the record, Stavros Anthony, Nevada Lieutenant Governor. I have a new person up here, Sarah Johnson. She is the Director of the Office of Small Business Administration. Just to give you a little background on this particular office, it was created the last legislative session, the Office of Small Business Advocacy. There was bipartisan support for it. It was created. Unfortunately, it was not funded, and there's a sunset clause for July 1st. The previous Lieutenant Governor submitted SB 24, which is currently going through the process to fully fund the office and to make it permanent. And I support the bill 100%. I support the previous Lieutenant Governor's bill to fully fund it and eliminate the sunset. The purpose of the office is to help small businesses navigate all the federal, state, and local regulations, licensing fees, requirements, everything that a small business needs to go through to open up when it comes to federal, state, and local regulations. As I'm sure you know, it can be very onerous. Some people have to hire lobbyists to help them get through the process. We want to be the place that a small business can call and say, can you help me get through the government process so I can get my business open? And we will do that. That's our commitment. And I'd like to, with your permission, Madam Chair, introduce again Sarah Johnson, who can talk about some of the successes that she's had since we took over the office when it comes to helping small businesses.
Yes, Sarah Johnson, for the record, I'm Director of the Office of Small Business Advocacy. Saying what the Lieutenant Governor said, we work with small businesses with licensing and regulation issues, so they come to us when they already have an issue. We work in tandem with state and local agencies, as well as community stakeholders like chambers and things like that to help small business owners in the state. We've been operating about 9 months since it was funded by CARES Act. We've done resource fairs, 2 in the north, 2 in the south, and have a lot of plans to do more in the future with rural communities. And then we also do small business roundtables where we get a better understanding of the issues that small business owners are facing. So far in the 9 months that we've worked with small business owners and entrepreneurs here in the state, we've helped 226 through our online portal, which is the Internet Quorum System, as well as just them coming to us directly. With that, if you have any questions.
Thank you. We do have a few questions. We're going to start with Senator Neal.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the question I have about the Office of Small Business Advocacy, I don't know, I mean, if you know the history, it took 2 sessions to get it out, right? And so I can tell you now that I wasn't a proponent of it the first go round, and grudgingly did it the second go round. But why isn't it, it's to me, it's always was a duplicate of what B&I is doing. So B&I has a business resource office, and they actually focus on capital, engagement, and going out and talking to small businesses about what they need. So tell me what you guys would be engaged in that's different. I read that you're going to be thinking about hosting legal clinics for entrepreneurs. And so I guess the first thing that came to my mind was, who else is doing this work? And why should you engage in this work outside of what B&I or any other small business fund or group that is funded through the legislature?
Sarah Johnson, for the record. We do different things than B&I, and I've talked with the Deputy Director, Marcel Shearer, with B&I. He fully supports the Office of Small Business Advocacy. From what I understand from Mr. Shearer, they work more with businesses like the Chamber would. So really connecting them to resources within the state. Also, there's a huge focus with B&I on funding mechanisms. We don't do that. Mostly we're happy to connect people if they have issues with that sort of thing, but definitely defer to B&I, also the chambers and other local organizations. We mainly focus on licensing and regulation issues within the state and local governments.
Quick follow-up. And that's the second part, right? So you're bringing up all of the reasons why I disliked it in 2019. Because the SOS, right, Secretary of State, is engaged in the role of, should be, right, engaged in the role of the laws that affect businesses, whether or not those are effective, whether or not licensing, because I know our chair passed a bill, right, to, I believe it's 2017, to allow for additional resources to be on SOS website for disadvantaged businesses, other programs that were in the state to be like, once you register, here are some other things that you should probably consider and engage in, because these programs already exist and are being paid for it by the state. And so to me, the crossover is, it's duplicative to me. I thought it was duplicative before. And don't be offended by this last comment, but I feel that it is creating something to do. And I felt that it was creating something to do back then that wasn't necessarily the need or the role of the LG.
Sarah Johnson, for the record. I think a lot of what we hear from entrepreneurs here in the state is that they call agencies and they can't get a response back. So they'll call the Secretary of State, or they'll call their, county government or city government and try and ask questions, or they'll have an issue with the health district with licensing for their food truck, and they can't get anyone to answer. And I've worked with a lot of businesses where just making that phone call and making that connection helps them resolve their issues, and that's what we're here for.
Madam Chair.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
If I could respond also through you. And I think part of it is we have all these agencies, and they're kind of siloed. They understand their particular area. They can answer questions in their particular area. But if somebody wants to understand what the local regulations are, then they have to call the local government, and then they don't understand what the state regulations are, so they have to call somebody in the state and try. And again, these are small businesses. We're not talking about Tesla or somebody. We're talking about somebody, a family that owns a business that they don't understand who to talk to. We want to be the person that that can let them know this is what you need to do. We're going to hold your hand. We're going to get you through this. We want you to open up your business. We want you to start making money. We want you to start employing people. And the short amount of time to do that is to help them with all these fees and regulations that not everybody understands. And we are going to have all that information to help these folks. So thank you.
And Lieutenant Governor, I'm going to remind you that I know it's repetitive, but every time you speak, you have to state your name for the record. I have one question before I move on. I have a list of members who would like to ask questions, but on the handout that we were provided, on the backside, it had that you regularly work with a number of organizations. Could you tell me exactly what that relationship is, what that partnership is, what you do with those organizations?
Absolutely, Sarah Johnson, for the record. These are our stakeholders. We host resource fairs with them, and we also refer small business owners when they have questions regarding funding to these organizations. But yeah, we work hand in hand with them.
So the one agency that I don't see on this is it is here, the Nevada Secretary of State. And as Senator had stated, in 2017, there was a bill passed by this body where the Secretary of State, when a business applies or renews their state business license, if they're a woman-owned business, a minority-owned business, or a veteran-owned business, that populates information, if they choose to disclose that, populates information to help their business grow, help find funding, financing. So what is your relationship with the Secretary of State, and how is that mechanism that was put in place in 2017 working with your office now to help our small business? Because we know small business are the backbone of all of our communities throughout the state. So what is that relationship, that working relationship with the Secretary of State's office?
Sarah Johnson, for the record. The relationship is good. Obviously, we just came into the role in January, but a lot of from what I understand historically, we have worked with the Secretary of State on is recommending changes to or improvements to Silver Flume, and I think that is working now. It's kind of going through with a one-stop shop bill that's on the table as well, some improvements to Silver Flume, and that I think has had a lot to do with the small business owners that we've talked to and then referred our recommendations for improvements to the Secretary of State's office.
Assemblywoman Kasama?
Thank you, Chair, but Senator Deal addressed my questions. Thank you.
Perfect. Senator Titus?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'm so glad to hear the comments from Senator Neal, as I too did not support this and was consistent in not supporting it and did not vote for it when it came through before. And so I'm excited to hear that my colleagues also didn't support it, but somehow it passed. But I went on the record of not voting for this because one of my comments has been all along, when it first was presented, it seems to me counterproductive that we have to create an office to help businesses through the licensure process of this state. What I would like to see your office do is look at how you can eliminate some of those hurdles to the small business. And that truly would be, I think, a focus you should have. I mean, when folks reach out to you that they need help, perhaps the goal would be for your department to come back to us and say, hey, this licensure they need 20 different licensures. I had a small business in my community a small, mom and pop grocery store. That poor guy, and he sold alcohol, sold ice cream, sold chicken. And he needed different licenses for all of those things. And he was so frustrated because he was paying the same cost as the big chain stores that, they could, like a Walmart could pay those no problem, when he needed the same licensures with his little small business. Those are the kinds of problems I think, you should be solving, but I'm not hearing that that's what you're doing. What you're doing is helping them maneuver through the hurdles, jump over them, go around them, and not eliminating them. And so, again, I have a hard time supporting this because of the very nature of the beast. It adds another layer of government, and we have been having some conversations regarding all the commissions and all the oversight that people have on these things. And it just seems to me that we are, again, continuing to expand government, when what we should be doing is looking at fixing our government, lowering some, getting rid of some positions, getting rid of these obstacles. So again, I have a hard time justifying these positions in this department. Thank you.
May I respond, Madam Chair?
Go ahead.
Stavros Anthony, Nevada Lieutenant Governor, for the record. You are absolutely right. I had a bullet point right here to bring that up, and I failed to do so, but that is going to be one of our main responsibilities as we navigate with these businesses, as we discover these regulations and fees and licensing requirements. If we find some that we believe are not necessary, that are causing more trouble than they're helping, then I will go to the governor, I'll go to the department heads, I will go to your body to see how we can eliminate them, fix them, make them easier. That will be a major part of what this office is going to do. Sarah understands that. So my commitment to you today is we will be doing that very aggressively.
Assemblywoman Dickman?
Thank you, Chair. So it looks like the governor is recommending the elimination of funding, and I'm guessing maybe that's because of the sunset, but does he support this, continuing this office?
Well, first of all, Stavros Anthony for Nevada Lieutenant Governor. He does support the office. I'm going to let Daniel talk about why it's set up that way.
Daniel Marlowe, Administrator for Department of Administration, Administrative Services Division. Talk about bureaucratic titles. The budget was submitted with Decision Unit E490, expiration of grant. Because the original bill, second version of it, did not allow appropriations for this. The funding, we came to the Interim Finance Committee and received authority for CARES Act and ARPA funding for that. Because the current legislation sunsets this at the end of the biennium, that's why it was submitted with a $0 with that E490. Also, that the previous Lieutenant Governor had already submitted BDR for that. So instead of duplication of the proposed legislation.
Thank you, and I suspected that was the reason, but I just wondered if he was still supportive. Thank you.
Welcome. Senator Dondero Loop.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I have a kind of a two-part question. I'd like to hear some future goals of what's going to happen, but I want to go back to also the discussion, and I believe, Ms. Johnson, you might have said that, you know, other departments aren't doing or aren't responding fast enough, and Lieutenant Governor made the same comment, or not responding at all. You know, as a legislator, I get calls all the time. I just got one 2 weeks ago from somebody who said the governor's office said to call me. So that happens all the time. I cannot tell you how many times somebody calls me and says, I called XYZ's office and they told me to call you. Now, does that mean the person answering the phone didn't want to answer the question? I don't know. Or does that just mean they thought I knew the answer? But I think we need to find efficiency in those other offices that are supposed to be answering those questions, right? So I guess I would like to have some discussion about the future goals of the small business advocacy if this legislation is passed, and what will happen so that we don't have somebody calling me and saying, oh, guess what? The Office of Small Business told me to call you, or didn't answer their phone, or didn't have the right. So if you could kind of go down that road a little bit, it would be helpful.
Sure. Again, Stavros Anthony, Nevada Lieutenant Governor. Well, first of all, we are going to have a strategic plan put in place, goals. We haven't had a chance to do that, but you are going to see eventually a whole strategic plan for the Office of Small Business Advocacy. Absolutely. And you know, we want to be the We want to be the office where if you do get a call and you're not sure, and it involves regulations and fees, that you have them call us, and we'll handle that for you. That's the whole, really the point of the office is when people get phone calls and they don't know, or they don't know who to refer them to, and it involves regulation, fees on a federal, state, and local, they can call us, and we will take it over for you. So I hope that answers your question.
And would the staff consist of, who would the staff consist of in that office?
Yes, through you, Madam Chair. Again, Stavros Anthony. We would have a director and 2 deputy directors, one in the north and then one up here to handle one in the south, I'm sorry, and then one in the north to handle the north and the rural areas. That would be the office.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Assemblywoman Anderson?
My question was asked.
Okay. Members, any other questions? Assemblywoman Bacchus?
Thank you, Madam Chair. As you were speaking, I was kind of curious. I know right now we had indicated that IFC had given CARES Act monies to initially fund the office. Are there any other funding sources out there, grants, anything like that that could be dipped into to pay for this, or do you have any idea for other funding sources? Thanks.
Yeah, Sarah Johnson for the record. There are grant opportunities that we are exploring.
Madam Chair, may I ask a follow-up question? Would those additional grants be able to cover the whole office, or what kind of grants are those what proportion would those cover?
Probably not, Sarah Johnson for the record, probably not the whole budget. No, it would be an ancillary portion of the budget.
Okay, thank you.
And just to follow up on that, so if the grants aren't going to cover the whole budget, so if this is approved, will we be seeing this in future budgets to come out of the general fund to be part of your Lieutenant Governor's budget that we get presented to this body?
Well, the request, as well as, again, Stavros Anthony for the record, the request as well as SB 24 is to fully fund the office through the general fund. The grant opportunities, I think, would be more available funding to do anything additional that we can do to support small businesses, whether it's put on a fair or something like that. So I don't see the grant opportunities really supporting the office. It would support additional things that we want to do. I mean, this is important to us. We want to support small businesses, and we'll take on the challenge of anything that a grant opportunity allows us to do.
And then just my final question, I wanted to make sure I have this correct. You would have a director, 2 deputy directors, one in the north and one in the south. Will there also be an administrative secretary or administrative assistant to assist in the north and the south?
Thank you, Madam Chair. No, the current, again, Stavros Anthony for the record, thanks. You're a good man. The current administrative assistants and executive secretary, if that happens, would support the office. So we would not be asking for any additional administrative assistant positions. We would support them through the existing positions.
Sarah Johnson for the record. So we have a director, that's myself. We have a deputy director up here in Carson City that supports the northern and the rural areas. And then we've also asked for an administrative secretary in the original founding monies. There was a contract line item for $75,000 to support communications and public relations and marketing efforts. I come with that background, so we're eliminating that and then hiring an administrative secretary to take over some of the more administrative roles and duties.
Okay, so I'm going to ask a crazy question. So you bring that skill set to the position? And what happens when you find a different position with a bigger salary and you leave us? Who then would be in that office to fill in that gap if you leave? I know.
Again, Madam Chair, Stavros Anthony for the record. So first of all, whatever Sarah said is accurate, not what I said. So sorry about that. I had it mixed up. We'll just have to find somebody that has that skill set to do it because as Sarah said, we did eliminate the contract so she could take it on, but we'll just have to find somebody to do it.
Okay, I suggest you be really kind to her because we have a hard time getting great staff in the state, so.
She is wonderful.
Members, any other questions? All right, seeing none, that will close the hearing on Budget 1021, and I thank you for presenting here today.
Thank you.
And that brings us to our last item on today's agenda, which will be public comment. If you would like to make public comment, I invite you to call 669-900-6833. And when prompted, the meeting ID for today is 881-677-14205, and then press pound. If there is anyone here in Carson City that would like to make public comment, I invite you to come up to the table. Now you can fill in all the seats. If there's anyone in Las Vegas, and I don't see anyone unless they're hiding behind that pole, I invite you to the table in Las Vegas. See no one here in Carson City, and I see no one in Las Vegas. We'll move to the phone lines. BPS, do we have anyone joining us here by phone that would like to make public comment today?
Chair, the public line is open and working, but there are no callers at this time.
Thank you so much. So members, with that, brings us to the end of our agenda. We got out on time, even a little early. For those that are on Senate Finance, I want to let you know that you will have a meeting downstairs in room 2135. So don't get lost between the 4th and the 2nd floor. They need you for that meeting right now. And with that, this meeting is adjourned.